The first time Amara Obi saw the inside of that soup pot, she almost fainted. Not because of the smell, not because of the strange leaves floating on top like tiny green fingers, but because 3 hours earlier, the woman stirring that pot had looked her dead in the eye and said, "2 wives have entered this house before you. 2 wives have left this house in coffins. Let us see what will happen to you." If you are new here, subscribe now, because what happened next to Amara Obi is the kind of story that will sit in your chest for days. Turn on your notifications too, because this story has a twist near the end that even I did not see coming when I first heard it, and I promise you, you will not either. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Amara was 26 years old, and Lagos was the only life she had ever known. She grew up on the mainland, in a small flat in Yaba, the daughter of a seamstress who taught her to thread a needle before she could properly hold a pencil. By the time Amara turned 24, she had her own fashion label, small but growing, the kind of business young women in Lekki and Victoria Island were beginning to whisper about. She was sharp, she was independent, she did not believe in juju, did not believe in curses, did not believe that a pot of soup could kill a grown woman. She believed in hard work. She believed in her fiancé, Chidi Ume, a soft-spoken structural engineer who had proposed to her on the rooftop of a hotel in Ikoyi, with the Lagos skyline glittering behind him like a promise. What Amara did not know, what she could not have known, was that Chidi's family came from a small village outside Awka, a village called Umoji, where old things did not die easily. Old grudges, old fears, old secrets. And in that village lived a woman the whole community called behind her back the widow who buries her sons' wives. Her name was Ne Adaeze, Chidi's mother. Before we go further, I need you to understand something. Chidi loved his mother fiercely, the way only a son who watched his mother suffer can love her. But even Chidi, when Amara asked him about his mother, would go quiet. His eyes would drop to the floor, and all he would say was, "My mother is complicated. You will understand when you meet her." Amara laughed it off at the time. Every mother is complicated, she thought. Every man says his mother is difficult. She had no idea that complicated was the gentlest word Chidi could find for what was waiting for her in that village. The wedding traditions demanded that Amara travel to Umoji for the introduction ceremony, the one where the bride kneels before the groom's family and is formally welcomed or rejected. Chidi's elder brother, Emeka, had already gone ahead to prepare the compound. Emeka's wife, Ifenyainwa, had been managing the family home for 6 years, ever since she married into the Ume family. Ifenyainwa was the kind of woman people described as sweet, soft voice, quick smile, always the first to offer you a cup of water when you arrived at the compound gate. Amara liked her immediately. That should have been her first warning. In this kind of story, the people who smile the widest are rarely the ones telling you the truth. The drive from the airport in Enugu to Umoji took almost 2 hours, past red laterite roads and cassava farms and children chasing bicycle tires with sticks. Amara held Chidi's hand the entire way, her stomach twisting with nerves that had nothing to do with juju and everything to do with wanting his family to love her. "Just relax," Chidi kept saying. "My mother's back is worse than her bite." She was wrong, and somewhere deep inside him, in the part of himself he had buried under years of city life and forced smiles, Chidi already knew he was wrong. When the car finally pulled into the compound, the first thing Amara noticed was the silence. Not peaceful silence, watching silence. old women sitting under the mango tree stopped their conversation and turned to stare at her, the way you would stare at a goat being led into a market you already know it will not leave. Children peeked out from behind door frames and then disappeared, whispering. And there, standing in the doorway of the main house, arms folded across her wrapper, was Ne Adayeze. She was not what Amara expected. Amara had pictured somehow a small, frail old woman, bent with age. Instead, Ine Adayeze stood tall and straight-backed, her grey hair wrapped in a dark scarf, her face carved from something that looked like stone that had once, a long time ago, been soft. She did not smile. She did not rush forward to embrace her son's bride the way mothers do in the movies. She simply looked at Amara, looked through her really, and said nothing for almost 30 seconds. 30 seconds doesn't sound long. Try counting it in your head right now while someone stares at you in complete silence in front of an entire compound of people waiting to see what will happen. Finally, Ine Adayeze spoke. "So this is the Lagos girl," Amara said. "Good afternoon, ma," bowing slightly the way her own mother had trained her to greet elders. "Come inside," was all the older woman said, and she turned and walked into the house without waiting to see if Amara followed. That night, after the formal greetings were done, after the kola nut had been broken and the palm wine had been poured and the elders had made their long speeches about tradition and family and the joining of two bloodlines, Amara found herself alone in the visitor's room, unpacking her small suitcase with shaking hands. Ifeanyiwa knocked softly and slipped inside, closing the door behind her. "You did well today," Ifeanyiwa said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Mama Adayeze does not talk much to strangers. That is just how she is." Amara said, "She hates me." No, Ifeanyiwa waved a hand, but her eyes did not quite meet Amara's. "It's not hatred, it's just, you should know something before you go further with this marriage." Amara's stomach dropped. "What?" Ifeanyiwa glanced at the door, lowered her voice even further, and said the words that would haunt Amara for the next several weeks. "Chidi is the third son to bring a wife into this house. The first daughter-in-law, Ngozi, died 2 years after her wedding. Fever, they said, but the fever came only after she ate from Mama's private pot, the one she cooks alone, the one nobody else is allowed to touch. The second daughter-in-law, Blessing, left after 8 months, ran back to her family in Onitsha and refused to ever return, refused to even explain why. People say Mama put something in her food too, something that made her lose her mind small, until she started seeing things that were not there." Amara felt the room tilt slightly. "And nobody did anything? Nobody asked questions?" "This is the village, my sister." Ifeanyiwa's voice had a strange, almost satisfied calm to it now. "Nobody asks Mama Adeze questions. Even the elders fear her small. They say she knows things, old things, the kind of things her own mother taught her back when Umoji still had a shrine at the edge of the forest." If you are still watching this, drop a like right now, because what Amara did next, most people would not have the courage to do. She did not run. She did not pack her bag that night and beg Chidi to take her back to Lagos. Instead, she sat with her fear all night, turning it over and over in her mind, and by morning, she had made a decision. She was going to find out the truth for herself. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. By day, the compound buzzed with wedding preparations, women pounding yam, men slaughtering a goat for the coming ceremony, children running between legs with cups of zobo. By night, Amara lay awake, listening to every sound the old house made, every creak, every distant chant from somewhere beyond the compound wall, where, she was told, there was a small grove the elders still visited during certain moons. She noticed things, small things. The way Neadeze locked her personal kitchen, not the main compound kitchen where the daughters-in-law cooked communal meals, but a smaller, separate hut behind the house with an actual padlock, the only padlock in the entire compound. The way she disappeared into the surrounding bush every morning before sunrise and returned with a small basket of leaves, roots and bark, which she took directly into that locked hut. The way she watched Amara eat every single meal with an intensity that made the food feel like stone in Amara's throat. On the fourth day, Amara worked up the courage to ask Chidi directly. "Your mother watches me eat," she said, as they sat under the mango tree in the fading evening light. Chidi's jaw tightened. "I've noticed. Ifeinwa told me about Ngozi and Blessing." For a long moment, Chidi said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful, like a man walking across a bridge he wasn't sure would hold his weight. "Ngozi died of typhoid fever. It happens here more than people in Lagos want to admit. The water, the sanitation. It had nothing to do with my mother." "And Blessing?" "Blessing was..." He hesitated. "Blessing struggled with things even before she married my brother Obina, things from her past. My mother tried to help her. It didn't look that way from the outside, but she tried." "Chidi," Amara took his hand. "Ifeinwa said your mother locks herself away with strange herbs, that she cooked something for Ngozi from a private pot nobody else is allowed to touch." Something flickered across Chidi's face. Not guilt, not defensiveness, but something closer to old grief. "My mother has her reasons for the things she does. I won't pretend I fully understand them myself, but I know my mother, Amara. I grew up in this house. Whatever people say about her in this village, I have never, not once, seen her hurt anyone. Then why does the whole compound fear her?" Chidi looked away, towards the setting sun, towards the smoke rising from cooking fires across the compound. "Because fear is easier than the truth. And in this village, the truth about my mother is a story that belongs to her, not to me. If you want to know, ask her yourself. She might surprise you." That night, unable to sleep, Amara did something she would later describe as either the bravest or the most foolish thing she had ever done. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and walked barefoot across the compound towards the small locked hut behind the main house. The padlock, for the first time since Amara arrived, was hanging open. Now, before you shout at your screen telling her not to go inside, yes, I know. This is exactly the part in every scary movie where you want to reach through the screen and grab the character's arm. But remember what I told you at the beginning. Amara did not believe in juju. She believed in evidence. And that night, she wanted evidence more than she wanted safety. She pushed the door open. Inside, the hut smelled of dried herbs and something sharp, almost medicinal, like her grandmother's old kitchen back in Yaba during malaria season. Bundles of leaves hung from the ceiling. Clay pots lined the walls, each one labeled in a careful hand with names Amara didn't recognize, some in Igbo and some in what looked like scientific terms. In the center of the room sat a low wooden table, and on that table, spread open, was a thick, worn notebook. Amara stepped closer, her heart hammering, and looked down at the page. It wasn't a spell book. It was a medical journal. Dates, symptoms, dosages, names. Ngozi Ume, persistent fatigue, joint pain, low appetite. Suspect slow poisoning. Administered charcoal and bitter leaf extract to purge. Improvement noted. Then sudden relapse 3 days later. Patient deceased 14th of March. Cause unclear. Suspicious. Amara's hands began to shake. Blessing Ume, hallucinations, disorientation, tremors, symptoms consistent with datura exposure, not mental illness as villagers assumed, removed from compound for her safety, advised to return to family home immediately, told her nothing to avoid panic. She survived. Below that entry, more recent, dated only 3 weeks earlier, before Amara had even arrived in the village, was a final line that made the blood drain from Amara's face entirely. New daughter-in-law arriving soon. Must watch her food closely. If the pattern continues, she will be the third target. I must find out who is doing this before it is too late. Amara heard footsteps behind her and spun around so fast she knocked over a small clay pot which shattered against the floor. Inyadeze stood in the doorway, a lantern in her hand, her face unreadable in the flickering light. "So," the old woman said quietly, "you have found my notebook. If you have made it this far, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now, because I promise you, the story is about to turn completely upside down and you do not want to miss what Inyadeze says next." Amara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was standing in the middle of a locked hut she wasn't supposed to enter at midnight, having just read evidence that suggested 2 women had been poisoned, not by her mother-in-law, but possibly with her mother-in-law's knowledge, and she had no idea what to say or what to believe or whether she was in danger. "Sit down," Inyadeze said, setting the lantern on the table and lowering herself onto a low stool. "It is time you knew the truth. It is long past time, actually. I should have told Chidi years ago, but I was afraid of what it would do to this family if the wrong person found out I was watching." "Watching who?" Amara finally managed to whisper. "Sit," Inyadeze repeated, and this time Amara obeyed. Inyadeze folded her hands in her lap and began to speak, her voice low, steady, the voice of a woman who had carried a heavy secret for a very long time and was finally allowed to set it down. "When I married into this family 40 years ago, I was the 3rd wife brought into this compound. My husband's mother, Chidi's grandmother, was a healer, not a witch, whatever this village likes to whisper, a healer. She read the body the way other women read the sky before rain. She taught me everything she knew before she died because she saw something in me, a sharpness, an eye for detail that most people do not have." "Ngozi," Amara said, "she died of poison?" "She died because someone in this family has been slowly poisoning the wives who marry into it," Inyadeze said, her voice hardening. "I began to suspect it with Ngozi, but too late. By the time I recognized the symptoms, the specific pattern, the slow build, the way her body was shutting down organ by organ, she was already too weak. I tried to save her. I could not. It has haunted me every day since." "And Blessing?" "With Blessing, I recognized it sooner. Datura, what some people call the moonflower, the madman's herb. If you feed someone to it, slowly, in small doses, it does not kill them outright. It confuses them, makes them see things, makes everyone around them believe they have lost their mind, so that when they finally run away, in fear and shame, no one questions why. No one suspects poison. Everyone simply says, 'Ah, that one, she was never quite right in the head.'" Amara felt sick. "But why would you let the whole village believe it was you who was poisoning them? Why not just tell everyone the truth?" Inyadeze's eyes, for the first time since Amara had arrived in the compound, filled with something like exhaustion. "Because I did not yet know who was responsible, and if I accused the wrong person, in a family, in a village like this, I would tear this compound apart on nothing but suspicion. So I let them believe what they wanted to believe about me. I let myself become the wicked mother-in-law of Umoji because it kept me close enough to watch and it kept the real poisoner comfortable enough to believe they would never be caught." "So, who is it?" Amara asked, though somewhere in her chest a cold, creeping suspicion was already beginning to form. Ineadeze looked at her steadily. I do not know for certain yet, but I have narrowed it to one person, and I need your help to prove it. Because that person has already begun to test you, Amara. I have been watching your food since the day you arrived. 3 days ago, someone added something to your pepper soup that should not have been there. I removed your bowl and replaced it before you could take more than 2 spoons. Amara's mind raced backward. 3 days ago, the pepper soup that had tasted strange, bitter beneath the pepper, that she'd assumed was simply unfamiliar spices. She remembered feeling dizzy that evening, remembered blaming it on the heat, the travel, the stress of the introduction ceremony. Who served me that soup? Amara asked, though she already knew the answer before Ineadeze said the name. Ifeniwa. Everything Amara thought she knew rearranged itself in an instant. The sweet smile, the soft voice, the whispered warning about her own mother-in-law, planting fear exactly where it would do the most damage, exactly where it would keep Amara from ever suspecting the real threat in the compound. But why? Amara breathed. If you have ever watched a story where the villain is hiding in plain sight the entire time, smiling at you from the very first scene, then you already know how this feels. But stay with me, because we are not finished. There is still more beneath this. Subscribe now if you have not already, because the reason behind Ifeniwa's actions is darker than a simple case of jealousy, and it changes everything you think you understand about this family. Ineadeze rose from her stool and walked to the far corner of the hut, pulling out a small wooden box hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were old land documents, yellowed with age, and a folded letter with a broken wax seal. This compound sits on land that has been in the Ume family for 3 generations. My late husband, before he died, drew up an agreement dividing the land equally between our 3 sons, Obina, Emeka, and Chidi. Obina, the eldest, died young before he ever married, before he could claim his portion. That portion was meant to be redistributed among his surviving brothers, according to our custom. And Ifeniwa is married to Emeka, Amara said slowly, pieces sliding into place. If something happens to Chidi's wife before an heir is born, if the marriage never produces a child to inherit, then everything eventually reverts to Emeka's line. Neadazi finished. Ifeanyiwa has 1 daughter so far, no sons. If Chidi's marriage fails, through death, through scandal, through a wife who runs away in shame like Blessing did, the elders will eventually declare that portion of land unclaimed, and it will fall to Emeka, meaning it will fall in practice to Ifeanyiwa, who controls every decision in that household. She has been trying to prevent any daughter-in-law from ever successfully producing an heir in Chidi's or Obina's line, so that her own children inherit everything. Does Emeka know? Amara asked. Neadazi's face darkened. That is what I have not yet been able to determine. Emeka is a weak man, easily led. I do not know if he is helping her or if he simply does not want to see what is happening in his own house. Amara sat in stunned silence, staring at the documents, at the notebook, at this woman she had believed only hours earlier to be the most dangerous person in the compound. You could have told Chidi any of this. You could have told me. Why let everyone believe you were the wicked one? Because the moment I accused Ifeanyiwa without proof, she would simply stop, wait, and try again years later, more carefully. Or worse, she would turn the entire family against me and against you, painting herself as the victim of a jealous mother-in-law who wants to control her sons. I needed proof, real proof. And now, Ineadaze said, looking directly at Amara, I need a witness who is brave enough to help me get it. Amara did not sleep at all that night. By the time the sun rose over Umoji, gilding the compound in soft orange light, she had already agreed to a plan that terrified her more than anything she had faced in her 26 years of life. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Amara would pretend nothing had changed. She would continue eating meals in the compound as normal, continue smiling at Ifeanyiwa, continue playing the role of the naive city girl who feared her mother-in-law and trusted her sister-in-law completely. Meanwhile, Adaze would test every dish that reached Amara's plate before she ate it, using methods her own mother-in-law had taught her decades earlier. A silver spoon left to sit in suspicious food, certain leaves that change color when exposed to specific poisons, and most importantly, patience. They needed to catch Ifeanyiwa in the act. 3 days passed in unbearable tension. Amara smiled through breakfast that made her stomach knot with fear. She laughed at Ifeanyiwa's jokes while watching out of the corner of her eye every movement of the woman's hand near the cooking pots. She endured Adaze's continued cold, distant performance in front of the rest of the family, understanding now that every harsh word, every silent stare was a mask hiding a woman desperately trying to protect her. If you are enjoying this story so far, this is the part where I ask you to leave a comment telling me where you are watching from, because trust me, what happens next, you are going to want to talk about it. On the 4th night, everything changed. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for the following morning, the final traditional rites before Amara and Chidi would be recognized as fully married in the eyes of the village. That evening, a large communal dinner was prepared to celebrate. The entire extended family gathered under the mango tree, laughter and music filling the compound for the first time since Amara had arrived. Ifeanyiwa insisted on personally preparing a special dish for Amara that night, a rich bowl of oha soup, to welcome you properly into this family before tomorrow, she said, smiling that same warm smile that had fooled Amara on the very first day. Adaze intercepted the bowl before it reached the table, claiming she wanted to taste it first to make sure the salt is correct, the way I always do for new brides. It was a tradition she had invented on this spot, and thankfully, no one in the compound questioned an elder's right to inspect food before it reached the guest. In the privacy of her hut minutes later, using a silver spoon left resting in the soup, Adaze watched the metal darken at the edges, a reaction she recognized immediately. There was poison in the soup, a stronger dose than anything used before, enough, she would later explain to Amara with a trembling voice, to have caused serious illness within hours, possibly worse, especially timed the night before the wedding, when any collapse could easily be blamed on nerves, on stress, on the overwhelming excitement of the occasion. Now, Adaze had her proof. But proof alone was not enough. In a village like Umoji, an accusation without a confession could tear a family apart with nothing resolved, or even turn public opinion against the accuser rather than the accused, especially against the woman already whispered about as a witch for 40 years. Adaze needed Ifeanyiwa to confess in front of witnesses in a way that could not be denied or twisted later. So that night, after the compound had gone quiet, after the last lantern had been extinguished, Adaze sent word through a trusted elder, Papa Nnamdi, the oldest man in the family council, asking him to gather the senior members of the family at dawn, before the wedding rites began, for what she called an urgent matter concerning the safety of this house. Amara barely slept. She lay beside Chidi, who had been told only that her mother needed to speak with the family before the ceremony, nothing more. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to warn him, prepare him for what was coming, but Adaze had asked her to keep silent until morning, insisting that Chidi's reaction needed to be genuine, that if Ifeanyiwa sensed anything had changed, she might destroy evidence, might flee, might do something even more desperate. Dawn broke over Umoji grey and quiet, mist clinging to the cassava palms beyond the compound wall. By the time the sun had fully risen, the family council had gathered under the mango tree. Papa Nnamdi and 2 other elders, Emeka and Ifeanyiwa, Chidi looking anxious and confused, and Amara standing beside Adaze, her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. I have called this family together, Adaze began, her voice carrying across the silent compound, because for the past 6 years, this house has been cursed, not by spirits, not by witchcraft, but by poison administered by human hands against the wives who married into this family. Gasps rippled through the small gathering. Emeka's face went pale. Ifeanyi's expression remained carefully composed, but Amara, watching closely as she had been trained over the past few days, saw something flicker behind the woman's eyes, the first crack in a mask worn for years. Ngozi did not die of typhoid fever, Eneadaze continued. Blessing did not lose her mind from spiritual attack. Both were poisoned, slowly, deliberately, by someone in this compound who benefits from every failed marriage in Obinna and Chidi's bloodline. And last night, that same person attempted to poison Amara the night before her wedding. "This is madness," Ifeanyi said, her voice sharp, defensive. "Are you accusing me? After everything I have done for this family, cooking, cleaning, caring for your grandchildren." "I am not accusing you with words alone," Neadaze said calmly, reaching into the folds of her wrapper and producing the silver spoon still darkened at its edges, along with a small sealed jar containing a sample of the tainted soup. "I am accusing you with evidence. This soup, which you personally prepared and personally insisted on serving to Amara last night, has been tested. It contains the same poison found in Ngozi's food 6 years ago, and the same substance that caused Blessing's hallucinations before she fled this house in fear for her sanity." The compound fell into a silence so complete that Amara could hear birds calling from the trees beyond the wall. Ifeanyi's composure finally shattered. She said, her voice sharp, rising, cracking, "Do you know what it is like watching this family hand land to sons who did nothing to deserve it, while my daughter grows up with nothing, while Emeka is too weak to fight for what should be ours? Obinna died, and his portion should have come to us, to Emeka, to our children. Instead, you all sat there dividing everything as if my family didn't exist, as if my daughter's future didn't matter. So, you decided to kill for it," Neadaze said quietly, and the quiet was somehow more devastating than if she had shouted. "I never meant for Ngozi to die," Ifeanyi whispered, tears now streaming down her face, though whether from guilt or from finally being caught, Amara could not tell. Emeka, who had said nothing this entire time, finally spoke, his voice breaking. "You told me you were just trying to keep the wives from interfering in our home. You told me it was harmless herbs, nothing dangerous. You told me—" He stopped, unable to continue, sinking onto a nearby bench with his head in his hands. "He is telling the truth," Neadaze said, looking at Emeka with something that for the first time in Amara's presence resembled pity rather than suspicion. "I have watched this family carefully these past weeks. Emeka did not know the full extent of what his wife was doing. He is guilty of looking away, of choosing comfort over questions, but the poison was never his hand." Papa Nnamdi, silent until now, rose slowly to his feet, his old voice trembling with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere far beneath his years. "In 40 years as an elder of this family, I have never witnessed a betrayal such as this. Ifeanyi, you have taken 2 lives, one fully, one nearly, and attempted a third, all so that greed could wear the face of a loving wife and mother. This council will decide your fate according to the laws of our people, but you will not remain in this compound another night." If you are still with me, this is the part of the story that always gets me, because justice, real justice, is rarely loud and dramatic like it is in movies. Sometimes it is just an old woman quietly gathering evidence for years, waiting for the exact right moment to finally set the truth free. If this story is moving you even a little, hit that subscribe button now, because the ending of this one is going to stay with you. The days that followed were chaotic in the way that truth always is after it has been buried for too long. The village council convened a formal hearing. Ifeanyi, faced with the physical evidence and her own confession witnessed by elders, could not deny what she had done. under customary law, she was banished from the Ume family and ultimately from the village itself. Her family disgraced. Her marriage to Emeka effectively ended in everything but paperwork, since he refused to follow her into exile, choosing instead to remain and slowly rebuild trust with the family he had failed to protect. Ngozi's family, informed at last of the true cause of their daughter's death, wept both from grief renewed and from a strange aching relief, the relief of finally understanding why the daughter they loved had died, rather than carrying an unanswered question for the rest of their lives. Blessing, when word reached her in Onitsha, returned to Umoji for the first time in years, not to reclaim her marriage to Obina's memory, since he had passed, but to stand before the family and finally receive the apology she had been owed for the years everyone believed she had simply lost her mind. And Neadaze, the woman the entire village whispered about for 40 decades, the woman children were warned to stay away from, the woman Amara had been terrified to even greet on her first day in the compound, was for the first time in her adult life finally seen for who she truly was. Not a wicked mother-in-law, not a witch guarding dark secrets, but a healer, a protector, a woman who had carried the unbearable weight of watching over her family in silence, accepting the world's cruelest rumors about herself rather than risk destroying an innocent life with an accusation she could not yet prove. Amara's wedding, delayed by 3 days while the family dealt with the aftermath of the revelation, finally took place beneath the same mango tree where the truth had been exposed. This time, when Neadaze stood to bless the union, her hands resting on Amara's bowed head, there was no coldness in her voice, no distance in her eyes. When you first arrived in this compound, I told you 2 wives before you had left this house in coffins or in fear. I said it to test whether you would run, whether you would trust rumor over patience. You did neither. You stayed. You watched. You trusted the truth to reveal itself, even when it terrified you. That is the kind of woman I am proud to call my daughter. Amara, kneeling in the traditional bridal wrapper, could not stop the tears from falling, though these tears carried none of the fear that had haunted her first days in Umoji. Chidi knelt beside her, his hand finding hers, and for the first time since their engagement, Amara felt the full weight of what it meant to truly belong to this family, not through blood, but through the trial they had survived together. In the months that followed, Amara and Chidi settled into their new life, splitting their time between Lagos and Umoji, Amara's fashion label growing steadily, drawing inspiration, she often said in interviews, from a village that taught me the most important lesson of my life, that the person everyone warns you to fear might actually be the one protecting you, and the person everyone trusts with a smile might be the one you should watch most closely. Neadaze eventually opened her private hut to the rest of the compound, no longer secrecy now that the threat had been removed. She began teaching Amara slowly, patiently, the same healing knowledge passed down to her decades earlier. Which leaves calmed fever, which roots eased pain, which signs in a person's skin or eyes revealed illness long before it became visible to an untrained eye. What had once been Amara's greatest fear became, in time, one of the deepest bonds of her life. A mother-in-law who had first tested her with silence and suspicion, transformed into the fiercest protector Amara had ever known. Emeka, humbled and changed by the events of that year, eventually remarried a quiet woman from a neighboring village, one that Neadaze personally vetted with a thoroughness that made the entire compound laugh, though everyone understood, this time, exactly why she was being so careful. And the village of Umoji, which had spent 40 years whispering about the wicked mother-in-law, slowly began telling a different story instead. The story of a woman who carried the truth alone for years, protecting her family from a threat none of them could see, asking nothing in return except the patience to eventually be believed. Amara often thought back to that first night, standing frozen outside the padlocked hut, terrified of what she might find inside. She had expected darkness. She had expected confirmation of every horrifying rumor she had been told. What she found instead was a woman who had sacrificed her own reputation, her own peace, her own relationships with her sons and grandchildren, all to quietly stand guard over a family that did not even know it needed guarding. If there is one thing this story taught me, and I hope it has taught you something too, it is this. The loudest warnings are not always the truest ones, and the people who seem the coldest are sometimes carrying the heaviest love silently, so that the rest of us never have to. Before you go, I want you to do 3 things for me. First, if this story kept you glued from beginning to end, smash that like button because it genuinely helps this channel grow. Second, subscribe if you haven't already and turn on that notification bell because next week's story is even more emotional than this one and you do not want to miss it. And third, tell me in the comments, if you were in Amara's position, standing outside that locked hut at midnight, would you have had the courage to open that door? This has been another story from the heart of the village, where old secrets never truly stay buried, and the truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds its way home. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next story.